This is video number 3 for section 11.3, Circles. We have finally reached the main topic of this lesson, which is the circle. Let's begin by reading this brief definition of what a circle is. A circle is the set of all points that are a fixed distance away from a fixed point. That might sound a little complicated. Let's break it down. The fixed point is often referred to as the center of the circle, and the fixed distance is often referred to as the radius of the circle. Let me see if I can use the picture to illustrate this. The idea is there was some fixed point here at the center. Notice that the center is not a part of the circle itself. How did the circle get formed? Well, from the center, someone went out some fixed distance, say r for the radius, and that gave them a point. And then they went out that same distance in some other direction, and that landed them another point. And then they went again in another direction, and so on. Well, if you kept doing that in all possible directions here, all of the points you would get would be the points that are on this circle. The circle is made up of all the points that are exactly r spaces away from that center point. All right, well, I think we have all the information we need now to try to meet our goal in this section, which is to write down the general equation of a circle in the xy plane. So I've drawn here a circle in the plane. I haven't labeled much of anything. Let's go ahead and add some labels. I'm going to call the center point, I'm going to call that h, comma, k. Those are fixed numbers is the idea, h, comma, k. And then let me draw in the radius somewhere. Of course, I could draw it in anywhere, right? It's the same distance in any direction. And I will call the radius r. Remember, so far these letters are fixed numbers. The center is some fixed point. The r is some set distance. Well, now I'm going to define a couple of variables. This point out here, and actually any point on the circle, I'm going to call x, comma, y. Again, it could be here, it could be here, it could be over here. X and y are variables. They stand for any point on the circle. Well, here's the great thing. No matter where I put that xy point, anywhere along the circle, it will always be exactly r units away from h, comma, k, from the center, right? That fixed distance is true no matter what point on the edge of the circle I'm talking about. Well, that means if I want an equation for this circle, all I need to do is come up with some equation that links these 5 letters together, and it will be true for every single point around the edge of the circle. Well, you can probably see, based on the last couple of videos, that the equation that links this information together is simply the distance formula. I have 2 points. I have h, comma, k. I have x, comma, y. That's the one that stands for all the points along the edge. No matter where I put it, the distance between those 2 points is always r. I just need to fill this into the distance formula, and I've got my general equation. I think I'm going to do that backwards. Let me start with the messy square root side. Remember, it has that really long square root in it, the distance formula. You open up a parentheses, and then you take your second x minus your first x, and that all gets squared. And then you add to that your second y minus your first y, and all of that gets squared. Well, that equals that distance. We had called it d before, but in this picture, that distance is called r. This equation, what we just wrote down, is the general equation for a circle. It's kind of a mess with the square root, so what we do to make it look nicer is we square both sides. When you square a square root, it just makes it go away. Let's write down now what we have. On the left, I have simply what was underneath the square root, and on the right, I have r squared. This was the goal of this lesson, coming up with this general equation. This is the general equation of a circle. It's like the y equals mx plus b, so to speak, of this lesson. Let's make sure we jot down the important information here. When you look at an equation that's in this format, you will now know, oh, that's the graph of a circle. And probably the two most important things that you want to remember are the center, which is h comma k, as well as the radius, which is r. A couple of things to mention. Once again, we've had this earlier this semester. You'll notice the built-in minus signs in this thing. That's going to be important to deal with. The h and the k are the numbers after the built-in minus sign. We'll see how that plays out in the examples. Also notice that r is not the number sitting over here. R squared is sitting over here. Well, the radius is not r squared, the radius is just r, and again, we'll have to figure out how to deal with that in the example problems. In any case, this is the equation that you need to memorize in order to deal with the circle problems in this lesson. In our next and final video, we'll work some examples where we use this equation.